Thank you, Guy, for that very warm introduction. I hope I live up to expectations, but life as a chair is quite busy at this university, as all others, so I suppose my research activity this year will be somewhat reduced, but I am actually going to Spain this evening for a conference and various research meetings next week to advance my project, so I at least will have at least a week away from administration. He thinks, but of course there are mobile devices where I will be, I'm sure, accessible. Right, so, let's see if this works. Good. In the year 25 BC, the Emperor Augustus's armies appeared what seemed at the time to be a decisive victory in campaigns against the Cantabrians and Galicians right up there in the north of Spain that had held out against Roman armies for 200 years. Augustus arrived personally from Gaul to lead the troops into battle. But, as unfortunately happened quite often in his career, he fell ill before the serious fighting started, and he decided quite sensibly to retire to the cooling charms of Tarraco on the Mediterranean coast, where there's a lovely beach and a lot of nice restaurants, and I'm sure it was rather the same in Roman antiquity. While he was relaxing, anyway, his armies slugged it out in the northern highlands of Spain, and eventually won a decisive victory. Now, after the first campaigns, we're told Augustus decided to found a new colony for the older soldiers of two of the legions who had fought in those campaigns, the Legio Quinta Alaudi and the Legio Decima Gemina. And they're actually commemorated on coins of the colony minted about 10 years later, as you see here. Now, the new colony was nowhere near the war zone. I mean, the wars were fought up here, but the colony was founded in the south of what is now Extremadura on the river Guadiana, in Roman times, the Anas. Now, the town was given a very significant name right from the start, Augusta Emerita. And indeed, Emerita was blazoned upon some of the local coins produced at the colony. And indeed, Bishop Isidore of Seville, many, many years later, in about AD 600, explained the actual meaning of the word. And I put a bit of Latin in this presentation today, just to, how many of you actually learnt Latin in high school? Okay, so this is for you. Okay, so you'll get a little bit of Latin. Not very complicated Latin in the course of the lecture. Anyway, as you can read here in the Latin, or if you prefer, in the English, emerita comes from the word emeriti, that is, discharged veterans who had deserved, who had, as it were, merited their discharge through their fine service for the Roman state. Anyway, so it was very much a veteran colony from the start, and it retained, I think, that military ethos throughout its history. There again are the coins, with, as I said, with the two legions involved. And the full title of the colony was even more interesting, as its full title was the Colonia Julia Augusta Emerita. Now, of course, Julia, of course, comes from the name Julius Caesar, the family of the Caesars, of which Augustus was the adopted son. So there was a double reference to the imperial family. So as it were, imperial patronage was crucial to the origins and identity of the community and was commemorated on the lead pipes that fed the houses with water and also on dedications. And here you can see a dedication to the Genius, the protective spirit of the colony of Augusta Emerita on the top of the screen. So I want you to bear in mind this imperial connection, because that's important for the story that I want to tell. Now, the founder of the colony was one of Augustus's generals, Publius Carisius. And at Mérida, he actually minted a very fine set of silver denarii, silver coins, to pay the soldiers for their campaigns up north. And there's a very interesting, I think, symbolic theme going through the coinage that he mints. I mean, some of the issues have clear warlike weapons, captured weapons from the enemy, recalling the raison d'etre of the colony and the soldiers who were settled there. There's also a set of the coins with military victory trophies. When the Romans won a battle, they piled up the enemy arms in these great monuments and left them as it were mnemonic devices for the victory. And the monumentalization of the new town is very much emblazoned on the coins. You can actually see, I hope you can just about see, the word Emerita written on the coin, which of course is the city gate. It's a little bit worn, the coin now, but I think you can see that that's the intended image. So war, victory, and peace and the foundation of cities seems to be the ideological thought pattern behind this series of coins, minted, as you can see, in the first 2 years of the colony's existence, between 25 and 23. So I think symbolically Mérida was a city of settled veterans, but it was to be a city of peace, to symbolize that this is a new era emerging now in Spain. The final pockets of resistance have been put down, and now we are to move into a new age of peace, which of course Augustus was triumphing right across the empire, since he of course had come to power after 30 years of very bloody and dangerous civil wars. So it was all part, I think, of his political message, as it were. Oh, don't think we need that. And even more importantly, the colony took on an extra significance about 10 years into its life. Because in the Republican period, Spain had been divided into two provinces, nearer Spain, that is nearer to Italy, Citerio, and further Spain, Ulterior, further away. Augustus left Citerio more or less intact, but he divided the province of Ulterior into two new provinces, Lusitania, which is most of modern Portugal, the sort of provinces of Salamanca, Avila, and Extremadura, and then the richer province of Baetica, which is more or less Andalusia in modern times. And of course, what did he do? He chose Emerita to be the administrative center, the administrative capital of the new province of Lusitania. And so this then gave it an extra significance as the place where the governor of the province, the financial administration of the province, including the chief tax collector, were resident. So it was the place where the major rituals of Roman power were displayed to this provincial population. And I want to pick that up later in the talk. So what I'd like to do is to look how the city develops in more or less the first 100 years of its existence. And we'll see that in the first phase, two very important benefactors of the colony were indeed Augustus himself and his son-in-law, Marcus Agrippa, who was really his right-hand man and the main general who brought the final victories in the civil wars. The defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, in fact, at Actium, was due to Agrippa. Augustus was also ill on that day, sort of puking up over the side of his ship. He couldn't take part in the battle, but Agrippa looked after the show for him, and Augustus then married him off to his daughter, so he was brought very much into the center of power. And both of these figures played an important part in the initial monumentalization of the city, providing funds, for, as we'll see, for the theatre and the amphitheatre in the colony's urban centre. And as I said, this is where the Roman provincial governor held his residence, and so he's a key player, a key interactive player in the politics between the imperial centre, Rome, and the provincial population of Spain. The governor is the guy that is representing the emperor and, as it were, doing the emperor's good or less good deeds, depending on how things went. And as we'll see, there, of course, in the first 100 years of the imperial period, developed a very important emphasis on the cult of deified emperors. After their death, the good ones got turned into gods. The bad ones got sort of forgotten. So Caligula didn't get deified, for example. But these rituals centered around the worship of the deified emperors, I'm going to argue, took a crucial role in the spreading of the, as it were, symbols of Roman power. and became, as it were, a tool of control over a provincial population, sort of controlled by symbolic means, by other means. So, and I also finally want to argue that the city serves in a way as almost a mirror image of Rome. But we're going to see in many of its public buildings, they're directly modelled on monuments from the city of Rome. And I think this is quite a conscious decision to show the provincial population in Spain just what Rome is really all about. This is what a Roman city should look like, and there are some very direct copying going on from the city of Rome. So there's an actual linkage between Rome and the colony. And of course, there's all sorts of movement of peoples between the two. We'll see a very nice recent inscription discovered near Tivoli, actually, in Italy, near Tusculum, an embassy, legati, two individuals from Mérida actually go to a former governor of Lusitania's country villa and set up a statue to his wife. A charming ritual, but just think of the implications of that, the social ties that a Roman provincial governor coming out from Italy and ruling, in this case, this man ruled for probably 10 years in Lusitania. So he obviously built up a really good relationship with the local elite. And here they're going all the way across to Italy to thank the governor in the form of honouring his wife with a statue that he proudly displays in his country villa about 20 kilometres outside Rome. So there are real toings and froings between imperial centre and provincial capital. Of course, Roman administrators, imperial slaves and freedmen who are part of the administration, moving from Rome to the province and back to Rome again. But I think there's also a conceptual link that's being established here. The Romans, through building up this monumental environment, are trying to make the Spaniards and these retired veterans and their successors, descendants, really Romans, making them conceptually part of the centre of power, even though they're located in the most far western province of the Roman Empire, almost the back end of beyond as far as Rome was concerned. So, Rome also made Mérida a judicial centre, a conventus centre, that is a place where the Roman governor gave justice on an annual basis. He went on a tour, and as you can see, in the province of Lusitania, there were just 3 places he gave justice. And so that, I think, also enhances the importance of this city. And I think we're going to see how when the governor gave justice in a monumental setting that just looked like Rome, that also helped to enhance his judicial authority and power among the provincial citizens. And also, Mérida was a large city. It's the largest in Spain, in fact, roughly 80 hectares in extent, and the only 2 other cities that can compare with that are the other 2 provincial capitals, Córdoba and Taraco, that are about 60 hectares. Even the 2 other colonies in Lusitania are much smaller, around 25 hectares, and important places like Italica and Barcelona, Barquino, are much, much smaller in comparison, half the size of Emerita. So the physical size of the place must have made an immediate impact upon anybody who visited it. And indeed, if you came from the south, you had to cross this bridge across the River Guadiana that's 800 meters in extent. It's helped by the fact there's a sort of island in the middle of the river, but it's a very impressive piece of monumental architecture in its own right. Rome, as it were, showing off its engineering skills in building this bridge. They could have founded the colony at a series of other places where you could cross the river much more easily. But I think they purposely chose it more or less where the river is at its widest, just to show what we Romans can do. You guys better watch out. We know how to do things efficiently and effectively. And this bridge, I think, which was laid out right from the start, is, I think, an important symbol of that. As I said, the urban layout was mapped out at the very start and being on the coins, both the silver coins of Publius Carisius and the local bronze coins. The city gate and the city walls were clearly an important part of its identity as a city, and they come through on these coin images. Aqueducts, of course, towering aqueducts. Mérida now has 4 aqueduct systems leading to 2 separate reservoirs, one 15 kilometers away, the other one 25 kilometers away. This is, again, a demonstration of Romans' technological genius to build these grand monuments that really impress any visitor now, even to the city, even though they're in a half-ruined state. The reservoirs, actually, are still quite functional, and there's the 2 of them on either side. Okay, the dam wall has been rebuilt over the years, but it's still basically on the Roman foundations. And look at this inscription. Well, actually, the inscription's gone because it was originally bronze letters, but you can see the dowel holes, and I think it's pretty undisputed that the reading must be Aqua Augusta. So every time you got fresh water, you were invited to think once again of the Roman emperor and the benefactions that he brought to this far-flung provincial community. As I said, the layout was, again, typically geometric, although because of the topography, there's some oddities on this side, obviously. But it's perfectly geometrical, based on a major, the Decumanus, the main north-south street, basically, and then the crossing Cardo, east-west. And you can see how it's all aligned on that bridge that we were just looking. As you came from Seville down here and eventually go up to Leon and Asturga in the north, you cross right through the center of town. So again, the sort of control of landscape through this geometric planning, I think, is definitely prepared. And the 2 bridges, a smaller bridge in addition, is this one here. But coming back to the main monumental buildings in the center, it was Marcus Agrippa, Augustus' son-in-law from 21 BC, who played a central role in the construction of the theatre. His name has survived on no fewer than 5 monumental inscriptions from the building, and he's named in the nominative, which suggests that he is the person providing the funding for this. Again, more dowel holes. It's quite fun playing with epigraphy, you see, because you just here there would have been beautiful bronze letters, and indeed some of the bronze letters were excavated and have survived, which basically commemorate that it's Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, consul for the 3rd time, holding tribunician power for the 3rd time. And people who held tribunician power are only the narrowest companions of the emperor. It's really only the emperor and Agrippa who have this power at this point. The power of the old tribune of the plebs, protecting the people. Again, a populist gesture by an autocratic ruler. And you can see there's all other inscriptions in marble to Agrippa in the inside of the theatre. And it's been argued that they were actually moved in about AD 70 from their original setting. They were probably originally on the stage building here, but then they were put up, and there are 2 of them, one on this side and one on the mirror image entrance on the other. So almost as if Agrippa is an old relic who has to be preserved even when they're doing a refurbishment of the building. They keep Agrippa's name in big lights. He's important to the identity of the building and to the community in general. And we'll see a bit more of Agrippa later in the talk. And then Augustus didn't want to be left out, did he? Of course. He couldn't be upstaged by his son-in-law. So a little bit later, the theatre was dedicated in 16 to 15 BC, and between the 26th of June, 8 BC, and the 25th of June, 7 BC, Augustus provided the funds for the amphitheatre for those more grisly activities such as gladiators and wild beast hunts, which you can see was planned in clear connection to the theatre right alongside it. And once again, we have 4 inscriptions to Augustus that have survived in various fragments, which would have been set up around the podium wall. So Augustus's name would have been everywhere as you sat and watched the grisly spectacles. And indeed, some of the spectacles were indeed depicted in rather beautiful paintings, which were set up on the podium wall. So they were actually found in this sort of location. There would have been a parapet mounted on here, and these pictures of wild beast hunts or beasts fighting beasts, as in this case, were discovered about 20 years ago. Well, not to be outdone, Augustus's successor and eventually son-in-law married the same daughter. She was a very useful girl, that Julia, before she got condemned for adultery and sent to an island. Tiberius had a hand in the construction of the circus, the chariot racing arena. So Mérida has all the mod cons of a really modern Roman city. There are very few Roman provincial towns that have all three of these. I mean, this is giving it the full panoply of what a major Roman city should look like. And of course, this would have been where the great processions on the major festivals, on the Ludi Magni, the great games of Rome in September, where again Roman power would have been praised and applauded through great processions and entertainments provided free of charge to the population of the colony. And not just the population of the colony, because of course this certainly attracted people to come in from other cities in the provinces. People migrated long distances to go watch these spectacles. And that's very much to Rome's advantage, because they come to a place which is laden with images of what Rome is all about, and this image gets disseminated beyond the actual place to all those visitors who then go back to their own place and start putting up similar monuments in the other towns of the province. And of course, the local magistrates, the local elites of these communities are the crucial, as it were, people who make the Roman system work. They buy in. They get given Roman citizenship. Some of them get promoted to the Roman equestrian order. Even some of them get put into the Roman Senate. And this is a clever way of controlling the provincial elite, who then control their own people, make sure they pay their taxes on time. They help Rome do the job of administering this huge empire. It's not like the Chinese Empire with a massive bureaucracy centered on Rome. Rome relies on the local elites to make the system work. So I think you begin to see how this monumental center is playing out in a series of very interesting ways. Okay, you think you're just going along for a good time to the theater or the amphitheater or the circus, but actually subliminally you're picking up the message, and that message is being designed by Rome. But I want to now come to the real heart of the city. You can see the spectacle buildings are on the periphery. The theatre and amphitheatre here, and the circus is actually up there off the map. But it's really in the forums, the piazzas of the downtown area of the colony that I want to concentrate on. I want to start with the original forum, which is here at the actual crossing point of the main Decumanus and the main Cardo. So in this sort of axiomatic position, we get the colony's first forum laid out right at the moment of foundation. Indeed, part of the original temple that stood in this forum, built of local granite, was built into a noble's palace, and it's been called, since the 16th century, the Temple of Diana, but it's got nothing to do with Diana at all. It's clearly a temple of the imperial cult from some of the statuary that's been discovered in this area. There's a close-up. So granite basically covered with stucco in the first phase. And I'll come back to materials in a minute. Because at the end of Augustus's reign, marble quarries were opened up on the edge of Mérida's territory, in modern Portugal actually, so about 100 kilometers to the west. But this marble gets extracted, and suddenly, after 30 years of existence, the place suddenly starts to gleam with this white or pinkish white marble from Estremoz and Villaviçosa. And indeed, the buildings, the temple that we've just been looking at, is modeled on a very crucial temple from the Forum at Rome. Who? The Forum of the deified Julius. In other words, Julius Caesar, when he went up to join the company of the gods. So Augustus's adoptive father, the reason why Augustus gained the power that he did, his temple from Rome becomes the model for the temple in Mérida. And some of these sculptural finds, okay, they're not perfectly preserved, but there are two gigantic statues of clearly divinized emperors in this half-naked style with a cloak sort of wrapped over their shoulder and around their private parts. But there's two of them, a beautiful one preserved in Seville and a less good one that's still in Mérida. But this head of Agrippina the Younger, the eventual wife of Claudius and mother of Nero, who eventually had her comeuppance when Nero started to fall out with his mother and had her put away. But she's got a diadem. She's clearly in a position of divination at this moment before her fall, and she was clearly venerated at this temple in the old colonial forum. But under Tiberius, so sometime around the year 20 AD, so 40 years more or less into the colony's existence, a whole other forum was carved out in this western part of the downtown. And you can see 4 housing blocks had to be removed from the original plan to build this second forum. That is once again, and here's remains of the base of this temple, that in plan is again modeled on a Roman temple from the Forum at Rome, the Temple of Concordia, the goddess Concord, of unanimity, of coming together. Again, a very interesting symbolic divinity to worship. And we've even got this pedestal from this new forum in Rome that I think you can see clearly said Concordiae Augustae, to the concord brought about by the emperor. So think of that again, trying to unite the people. And this forum has got evidence for honors to Tiberius, the Emperor Domitian, this one on the right to a early 4th century governor of the province, and excavations of the early 2000s. Okay, little fragments, but we can restore them because they're so formulaic, these inscriptions. And we can see here a gift of 50 pounds of silver set up with the intervention of a governor. Now, there are 3 possible candidates for which governor's name we can restore, but 50 pounds of silver, Roman pounds, that's 16.373 kilograms to be precise. And that's a fairly whopping dedication, I would say, set up in a ritual clearly involving the provincial governor, offering it presumably to a deified emperor, again with the population looking on. And another little fragment which we can restore as either a dedication to the Emperor Domitian or the Emperor Trajan, so either the late 1st century AD or the early 2nd century AD, depending on how the titles are restored. They were both Germanicuses, so this Ger here clearly has to be restored Germanicus, and it could either be Trajan or it could be Domitian. So it sounds as if this new forum was very much focused on the imperial family and the imperial cult with the surviving dedications that we have. And this man, Fulcinius Trio, who remember the statue to his wife, he seems to have played a key role in this new project. Because, as I said, he was provincial governor for 10 years. Tiberius liked to leave governors in place for long periods, so they'd get experience, they'd build up relations with the locals and would do a good job of administration. And this new inscription, again discovered and published quite recently in 2011, perhaps gives us another clue of this whole building program, if we restore this as Fulcinius Trionis, this same governor. And here it seems we've got all the conventus, the 3 juridical divisions of the province, all combining to honor a local man who's clearly Lucius Cornelius Bocchus, who is the right-hand man of the Roman governor. He's a praefectus fabrum, which is literally a prefect of the engineers, but it's more like a sort of adjutant, somebody who is at the right hand of the Roman governor organizing the administration. And he's a Lusitanian. He's a flamen, a chief priest of the imperial cult of the province. He's bought into the Roman system. He's helping this whole building program be rolled out and brought to pass. And we've got lots of evidence for him. He's actually born in what's now Portugal, at a place called Salacia, which is Alcácer do Sal, and he's certainly also honoured in Lisbon, which you see on this rather bad photograph, I'm afraid. So he's clearly a key local player who is linking up with the Roman provincial authorities to help bring the Roman world to Lusitania, to make it all work. So it's people like him that I think are crucial. Now, the Romans were not finished yet. If 2 forums weren't enough, well, why not have a third? So at a date that is really the subject of huge controversy between archaeologists at this moment, either late in the reign of Claudius or the reign of Nero, so in the 50s or 60s AD, or perhaps after the civil wars and when the new dynasty has come to power, the Flavian dynasty, so in the 70s AD. So it's within a 20-year period, and it's really unfortunate we can't pin it down more precisely. There is a major addition to the original forum. And you can see here in an artist's rendition, here's the original forum, and there is an annex. Now, when this drawing was made, they argued there was no temple in this new forum, which seemed a little bit surprising, knowing most other forums in the Roman world. But it's turned up in excavations of the last 7 years. And so now this is a more recent reconstruction where you see quite a dominant temple in this new addition to the forum. And here, it's not the best photo, but actually underneath, this urban archaeology is not easy because, of course, there's houses still all on the top of these things. So you could, can we put the lights down a little bit? You can see part of the ramp that supported the steps leading up to the temple there, or you might have to take my word for it. And you can see here the original paving stones of what would have been a city street that were then obliterated when they came to do the extension to the forum. Sorry, it was a rather dank November when I was let in to see this, so the pictures are not perhaps as good as they might be. So you see there's a constant upgrading of the urban centre. And this part, this new forum, is particularly interesting. Because I think you can see here, here we have one of the corners of the forum, and it clearly had a portico around 3 sides, and niches for statues. Some of the statuary has been preserved. And it has these, decorating the upper part of the portico, that are caryatid maidens in an engaged pilaster, and then these shield roundels with heads of Medusa, like this, or Jupiter Ammon, Jupiter of the Egyptian desert for the oasis with the little ram's horns you can just see here. Now this is a very distinctive decorative scheme, and here's an artist's reconstruction of where these things would be located. But of course what it is a direct copy of the Forum of Augustus at Rome, or an adaptation. It's not exactly identical. The caryatids in Rome are fully in the round rather than pilasters, but here, and Jupiter Ammon is a little bit more elegant in Rome, but it's the same decorative scheme. You're meant to think of the Forum of Augustus when you see this new forum in Mérida. And these toe-gate figures that stood in the niches might be a replication of the great gallery of Roman heroes that Augustus designed for his own forum in Rome. And in the museum there, you'll see these lovely, beautifully made toe-gate statues. But this head does not belong to this toe-gate. Look, he's got a diadem. Can you just see this band around his head curls? That means he's a king or a mythical figure, perhaps from early Rome. It doesn't belong on a toe-gate statue. And then, in these excavations in the 1980s, were discovered this part of a cuirass statue, a military statue, and also this old man with his toga pulled up over his head in a gesture of piety, because that's what you did when you went to sacrifice or make prayer. You pulled your toga over your head. And this rather unusual arm, what's this arm doing sticking out like this? This is a very strange posture. Anyway, the German art historian, archaeologist Walter Trilmich brilliantly made the connection of these pieces with this statue from Mérida, that's now in the National Museum in Madrid and has been there since the early 20th century. And it was labelled as Diana the Huntress for 100 years. And he said, nah, this is no woman. This is a young boy wearing sort of hunting boots. And the putting together of these three immediately gave Trilmit the idea, of course, this is the mythical family that founded Rome. This is Aeneas bringing his father, Anchises, and his son, Ascanius, away from the flames of Troy after it had been sacked by the Greeks, and leading them to Italy and eventually founding the city of Rome. And so now these three fragments have been reconstructed in this group and now reconstructed in digital form here. So we have an image of the founding father of Rome sitting in a key place in the Forum at Mérida. And then we went grubbing around for inscriptions, and we found again more fragments with scratches on. And this is actually what you've got. But my gosh, you know, our eyes just lit up when we read this, because this makes reference to somebody who's called the Indiges Pater, and he was carried off into the number of the gods, somewhere in some sacred grove. Wow, this is the same text we know about from Pompeii, which again is not complete, but it's got exactly the same ending, if you look here, with a few differences in spelling, but it's clearly the same, which is the elogium, the sort of potted history of Aeneas that Augustus actually wrote, composed it, to set up beneath his statue, maybe that three-part statue that we just saw, and put up in his forum in Rome. So we've got a text from Rome that is copied in Pompeii, that is copied in better Latin, I'll hasten to add, in Spain, in Augusta Emerita. Well, Mérida is a Roman colony and provincial capital, much more important than this tin pot town on the Bay of Naples. And in another paper which I haven't yet published, I'm actually proposing a complete reconstruction of the texts, because I've actually been to look at the fragments in Naples, and some of the readings of the fragments are not quite right, and I'm now with huge trepidation about to publish a reconstruction of the whole text. But that's the subject for a whole different paper. And perhaps we have Romulus. According to a local archaeologist, here she argues Trinidad Nogales, we have a fragment of a statue of Romulus, who would of course be appropriate in the Forum of Mérida, and perhaps another inscription, although this is only based on a very small fragment, which fits a little bit of an inscription, again, from the Forum of Augustus, one of the great heroes of early Rome, who Augustus again wrote this potted history. So here's the Forum of Augustus at Rome, with the gallery of Aeneas here, Romulus there, all the great figures of Roman Republican history, and the kings of Alba Longa and Aeneas's family were all on display in Rome. And it's beginning to look as if we've got a very similar gallery of heroes, both mythical and historical, in this provincial capital. So just think of the impact of that. When the Roman governor gives justice sitting in front of the statue of Aeneas, that enhances his authority. And we know the Forum of Augustus in Rome was used for the praetor's tribunal, where legal cases were brought. And we've got a number of documents which talk about going to Rome to get your case heard in the Forum of Augustus in front of the statue of Gnaeus Sentius Saturninus. So just as people from Pompeii went to Rome to get their justice and sat there with this sort of entourage of all that really mattered about Rome's past, part of the trial, so I'm trying to argue a similar situation would have applied in Mérida. Two other monuments, I think, help to underline this Roman connection in the center. These fragments of very high quality sculpture have been discovered from the new forum near that Tiberius built. And indeed, we seem to have here Agrippa in an act of sacrifice with various sacrificial attendants, marking perhaps the initial foundation of the city. So Agrippa seems to come back in another work of monumental art that has these beautiful swag garlands and ox heads and paterae, these sacred dishes that caught the sacrificial blood from the victims and were used to pour libations. and this laurel tree. And of course, laurel is crucial to the ideology of the Augustan age as well. And it doesn't look that different from the famous monument, the Areopagus, right in the center of Rome. The monument put up by Augustus to symbolize the return of peace after civil war in Rome. And there are certain allusions to that monument, I think, in Mérida. And then these charming heads. What do we make of them? Well, there's one element that's immediately striking. This sort of necklace, this heavy metal necklace, perhaps in bronze. These are peoples of the north, the barbarians, the Cantabrians, perhaps, the people who had been conquered that gave rise to the foundation of the colony. So it's possible to argue that these three fragments may have formed part of a monumental trophy monument commemorating the Cantabrian victories that provided the raison d'etre for the colony. That's where the veterans came from. But that is, I admit, slightly more hypothetical. So we have, I would argue, then a sort of miniature Rome, a city modelled on the metropolitan capital, which helped to, as it were, diffuse Roman power and give provincials a sense of what Rome really meant. And of course, it's a long process. Rome was not built in a day, as they say, and certainly Mérida was not built in 50 years. It was at least a century with, as you see, additional monuments added to the catalogue, reforms of the amphitheatre, for example, in the Flavian period. The theatre was constantly being updated with shifts in the statuary on display on the stage, because Roman politics shifts, and when an emperor gets assassinated, you don't continue to display his statue, do you? And some new families come to power and need to be represented on the stage. So there's evidence for the constant updating and modifying of which emperors and which deified emperors were represented there. Because, of course, you could be de-deified in Rome. They were very practical people. You know, Caligula's sister, Drusilla, had been deified in her own lifetime by Caligula himself. But she didn't last as a goddess more than Caligula's reign. I mean, she had about 2 years in heaven before she was very much relegated from the light. And the theatre itself has also had a very interesting reform. As you can see, this is obviously reconstructed and is still used for an important festival of theatre in August, July and August in Mérida. But they carved out a sort of little enclave in the best seats of the house with this balustrade wall. And they found these blocks, marble blocks that clearly supported little statues. And the text says, sacred to Augustus on all of them, the same text, Aug Sacra. And there's this on the balustrade, again, fragments, but we can try and reconstruct them in a certain year of the colony, which seems to be 130, which is 105 AD in our terms. And it's something to do with Trajan, and it's perhaps a sacred space for the protective household gods of the emperor, the lares, and the imagines, the images of the imperial house. They were allowed to watch the show in the best seats. So this part of the auditorium would be the gods of the emperor and all the divinized members of the house. No humankind in that enceinte. But that, again, illustrates the ongoing nature of the monumentalization. So in conclusion, I want to suggest to you, I hope I've suggested to you, that this colony, way at the western extreme of the empire, helped to give a sort of distinctly metropolitan Roman ambience to a province as it was being integrated and organized into the Roman Empire. Mérida very quickly became a key center for the diffusion of the image of Roman power, and its identity was fixed from the start as a colony, a colonia of Roman citizens, with strong links to the metropolis, encouraged by the sort of personnel who were in residence here on a permanent basis. The Roman provincial governor, the Roman chief financial officer, in constant contact with the local elite, the local magistrates, the local high priests of the imperial cult, which was organized on the colony basis, but also on the provincial basis, because this was a provincial capital. Now, in much of the literature of 25 years ago, the Augustan age was very much emphasized. Everybody wanted to say Augustus did everything. That's not quite true. It did take time. And his successor Tiberius, Claudius, Nero, the Flavian emperors, Trajan, and even Hadrian were still actively interested in developing the Roman colony and providing funding for its monumentalization. It was a mixed funding pattern, as it were, of imperial encouragement from the center, but local contributions as well from the local elite, who as part of their status were required to contribute to the beautification and the development of the civic space. But I want to suggest most of all that these monumental buildings and their symbolically charged imagery took on greater significance because Mérida was the crucial stage on which a series of rituals underlining Roman power were played out in front of a large audience made up not just of the residents of Mérida itself, but subjects from other parts of the province who came to visit the provincial capital at certain key points of the year, mainly at festival times. And elites of other communities of the province came to visit. Most importantly, because each community got to elect a representative to the provincial council, which met in Mérida at the time of the imperial cult festivities of the year. And here you've got, again, slightly fragmentary inscription showing the provincial council by decree of the council of the province at the very bottom, setting up a statue to an important Roman senator who is from the neighboring province of Baetica to the south, modern Andalusia. And it would have been at Mérida on January the 3rd every year that the Roman provincial governor, standing alongside the provincial high priest of the imperial cult, took the vows for the security of the princeps, the emperor, his family, and the Roman state. Every January the 3rd, there would have been that. Then, on the same occasion, the province would have to renew its oath of allegiance from the soldiers who made up the entourage of the emperor and from the provincial subjects of Lusitania. There was a formal oath swearing to be loyal to the emperor and to his friends and to be hostile to the enemies of the emperor. So there was a double-edged sword. There were important rituals on the anniversary of the accession day of the emperor. So whenever he happened to take power, his dies imperii, there were further celebrations, again attended all by the high and mighty, but by crowds of thousands of onlookers. On the emperor's birthday, there were similar celebrations. So it was at Mérida that all those sorts of official occasions of the province showing its loyalty took place. It was a Emerita, remember, where the provincial governor held judicial assizes, where subjects came to have their cases heard and justice done. So you could see, that Rome was ensuring control and things were fair and equity was being observed in the sort of Roman understanding of that way. If you were better off and well connected, you stood a better chance of getting your case heard. But it would be at Emerita that took place. And it was here that the provincial council, which, as I've said, was made up of representatives from every urban community in the province, met to select the chief priest of the province and the chief priestess in charge of the female divinities of the imperial house, and where various honorific decrees, such as this one, were passed. And finally, it was at Emerita that the most important cultic acts took place to mark the province's devotion to the deified emperors and empresses of Rome, carried out under the supervision of the chief priest and chief priestess. And I want to finish with one final inscription that I'll see in Madrid when I'm at the National Archaeological Museum this week. And it's a little pedestal, no more than 30 centimeters high, that's got a hole in the top. And it's a dedication to Titus, who at this stage was the son of the ruling emperor Vespasian. And it's the Provincia Lusitania, it's the whole province making this dedication to him. And you've got the name of the Roman provincial governor, Gaius Aruntius Catelius Celer, and you've got the name of the chief priest of the province, Lucius Junius Latro, which means the bandit, which is quite an intriguing last name, from Conimbriga, so from way off in northern Portugal, near modern Coimbra. It's not actually Coimbra, but about 20 kilometers away. And he's Flamen Provinciae Lusitaniae, and the gift is a gift of £5 of gold. So we think there was probably there's a hole in the top, and there was probably a gold bust of Titus sitting in the top of this marble pedestal. Now that's, £8 of gold. That is, 8 kilograms of gold. That's an impressive figure. Just picture the occasion on which this was dedicated. It would surely have been in front of the big imperial cult temple in the main forum of Rome. The provincial governor was there, accompanied by his staff and military escort. And there would have been a whole ritual parade through the streets, perhaps carrying this dedicatory pedestal with the bust on top, because it's eminently portable. And so there would have been a procession leading up to sacrifices in the forum with the dedication of this offering to the temple. Just think about being there, thinking what it would have meant with all the authorities of Rome up on the platform, as it were, supervising the rituals. All the cities of the province would have been represented, but surely the provincial council was in session when this was dedicated. So it was the whole province, the Provincia Lusitania, that was seen to be paying its devotion to the imperial family, to the son of the ruling emperor, who, of course, all things being equal, should be the next emperor. And indeed he was. Didn't happen too often in Roman history, but in this case it did. So just think about the backdrop, the monumental backdrop to these acts. Think of the celebrations that took place, because after the dedication, surely there would have been gladiatorial shows or a theatre show, banquets. I mean, you don't waste all that sacrificial meat. It's one of the few occasions you actually eat it. And so there would have been feasting and joy and fun and voluptas, as many inscriptions talk about. This is what bound the imperial centre together. It was a potent mix. And I'd like to argue that it really was this sort of mix of monumental centre, the linkage between emperor, his representative, the provincial governor, the local elites, and their relationships with each of their communities that sort of bound the system together and made it work. The Romans ruled Spain from starting in 200 BC until the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals, and these people wrecked the whole show with their invasion in the early 5th century. But that's a sorry tale that I prefer to avoid, and I prefer to concentrate on the days when places like Mérida were being developed, and this most westerly province was being, I think, subtly and symbolically integrated into the imperial whole. Thank you very much.